Evelyn stood by the window of her modest yet modern apartment in Johannesburg, staring out at the sea of lights that stretched across the city skyline. The city was alive beneath her, pulsing with traffic, laughter, and the quiet desperation that only big cities can carry. In the glass, her reflection looked polished. The tailored suit, the neatly tied hair, the practiced smile of a woman who had fought to carve out her own space in this vast, demanding world. Yet, behind that polished image, her heart felt impossibly heavy. Johannesburg had been her dream once, a place where a small-town girl could become something more than just another face in a dusty crowd. She had come here after college, determined to build a life that would lift her entire family out of poverty. And she had done it step by step, working late hours in a finance firm that rewarded discipline and ambition. Promotions came, along with accolades and higher pay. But with every rung she climbed, the weight on her shoulders grew heavier. Her mother's voice always found her, even across the miles. "Evie, your little brother's school fees are due. Can you help?" Her mother's tone was never harsh, never demanding, just expectant. And Evelyn always answered with the same unwavering sense of duty. She wired the money instantly, never asking what had gone wrong this time. She told herself it was love that made her so quick to act. Love didn't need explanations, it simply gave. She had believed that for years. She had believed it so deeply that she forgot to ask what she was giving up in the process. The holidays were approaching now. Johannesburg's December sun bright and unrelenting. Offices were closing for the season, and the city hummed with anticipation. Evelyn had always spent Christmas here in the city, too busy, too exhausted, too convinced that her presence wasn't as important as her money. But this year felt different. She missed home, the rolling hills of Limpopo, the smell of maize porridge in the kitchen, her father's soft voice during evening prayers. She missed the simple things, the laughter of her siblings playing soccer in the dirt yard, her mother humming old songs while she washed clothes. This year, she wanted to be there. She wanted to be more than a lifeline wired through a bank account. She wanted to feel the sun on her face, to look into their eyes, to remind them she wasn't just the provider, but also the daughter, the sister, the child who still longed for belonging. So Evelyn booked her ticket without telling anyone, hoping the surprise would make them as happy as it made her. She spent days preparing, choosing thoughtful gifts, withdrawing a generous bonus to help with the holidays. She wanted to show them that her love was more than money, it was presence. It was laughter and shared meals and the warmth of a family that had once meant everything. When she landed at the small regional airport near her hometown, she felt like she had never left. The familiar red dust clung to her shoes. The scent of wood smoke, the laughter of children playing chase everything, felt both new and deeply comforting. The taxi driver, an older man with kind eyes, helped her load her suitcase. He drove her through winding roads that led to the home she had sent money for repairs so many times. The house had once felt too small, too fragile to hold them all, but she had hoped that her sacrifices had made it stronger. As the taxi pulled up to the front gate, a rusted iron affair that leaned a little too far to the left, her heart pounded with anticipation. She imagined her father's shy smile, her mother's tearful embrace, her siblings' shouts of joy. But as she stepped out, suitcase in hand, she was met by silence. The yard was empty, the lights were off, no music played, no one came running. Confused, she knocked on the door. No answer. She called out, "Mama! Baba! It's me!" But her voice echoed in the emptiness. She reached for her phone and called her mother. No answer. Her brother's line went straight to voicemail. Panic started to creep into her chest. Just then, an elderly neighbor appeared from next door, a basket of fresh tomatoes balanced on her hip. She looked at Evelyn with surprise. "Evelyn, oh, my child, you're home? I thought you were staying in Johannesburg this year," she said gently. Evelyn tried to smile. "I came to surprise them," she said, but her voice cracked. The neighbor's eyes softened. "Ah, honey, your mother and the others, they went to Durban for Christmas. They left a few days ago. I think they wanted to see the ocean." Evelyn felt her knees weaken. "And my father?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The neighbor's expression fell. "He's been in the hospital. He's been sick. I thought you knew." The world seemed to tilt beneath Evelyn's feet. Her hands shook. "Which hospital?" she managed to ask. "The district hospital," the neighbor said. "It's not far. I hope you find him well." Without another word, Evelyn turned and dragged her suitcase back to the taxi. "Please," she told the driver, "the district hospital as fast as you can." The ride blurred into streaks of color and noise. Her mind raced. How could they have left him alone? Her father, who had spent his life working the land, who had given everything to them, how could they leave him now when he needed them most? The hospital smelled of disinfectant and fatigue. Evelyn approached the nurse at the reception desk, her voice trembling as she gave her father's name. The nurse hesitated, then pointed down a dimly lit corridor. "Ward 5, she said. "No visitors in days." Evelyn felt her heart split in two. She hurried down the hallway, each step echoing with her guilt. She found him lying on a narrow hospital bed, thin and pale. An IV hung crookedly above him, its fluid nearly empty. He looked so small, so fragile. His eyes fluttered open when he sensed her presence. "Evie," he whispered, his voice rasping from days without visitors. She dropped her suitcase and rushed to his side, grabbing his hand and pressing it to her cheek. Tears streamed down her face. "Daddy," she sobbed. "I'm here now. I'm so sorry." He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. She didn't call her mother. She didn't text her siblings. She didn't need excuses. She sat there by his bedside, holding his hand as the night deepened around them. She realized then how many nights she had spent working overtime in Johannesburg, thinking she was building a better life for them all, while her father lay here alone. The guilt was overwhelming, but she swallowed it. She had no time for regrets now, only for love. The next morning, Evelyn arranged for her father to be transferred to a private hospital in Johannesburg. She signed every form, paid every bill without hesitation. Before leaving the house she had grown up in, she left a note on the dining table, her handwriting neat and precise. "I came, I saw, and now I know. He was alone. You chose a holiday over family. I'm not angry, just changed." She didn't leave her contact number. She didn't owe them that, not anymore. The ambulance ride back to the city felt long and heavy. Evelyn sat by her father's side, holding his hand as the city loomed closer, promising both healing and new challenges. She would build a new life now, one where love wasn't measured by how much she gave, but by who deserved it. Johannesburg awaited, but so did a different kind of strength, a strength that came not from duty, but from a love that finally included herself. The city skyline faded behind them as the ambulance wound its way through the dusty roads leading toward the hospital. Evelyn's heart beat in time with the steady thrum of the wheels, each turn a silent plea that her father would hold on. She clutched his hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath her fingers. How had he gotten so thin? Her mind replayed the neighbor's words over and over. "He's been in the hospital. I thought you knew." But she hadn't known. She hadn't known because her mother and siblings had chosen to keep her in the dark. When they arrived at the private hospital in Johannesburg, Evelyn moved with a calm that belied the storm inside her. She handled the paperwork, signed every document, and ensured her father was settled into a clean, sunlit room. The staff recognized her from previous donations she had made to the hospital's charity wing, and they treated her with a respect that both comforted and saddened her. It shouldn't have taken money to get her father the care he deserved. Once he was settled, she sat by his bedside, listening to his labored breathing. The oxygen hissed gently from the tank at his side, a reminder of how fragile life could be. She thought back to the countless times she had sat in this same hospital. Only it had always been for other people, her mother's checkups, her brother's broken arm, her sister's asthma. She had always been the one to pay the bills, sign the papers, calm the panic. But this was different. This time she had been left out until it was almost too late. She didn't bother to check her phone. She knew there would be messages from her mother, maybe even from her siblings, explanations, apologies, excuses. But she wasn't ready to hear them. Not yet. Instead, she focused on her father. He woke a little later that afternoon, his eyes clearer now, his voice no longer just a hoarse whisper. "Evie," he said, his lips trembling. "I'm so sorry you had to find out like this." She shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "Don't you dare apologize. You've carried all of us your whole life. Let me carry you now." He smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes creasing in that familiar way that made her feel like a little girl again. For a moment, she let herself lean into that feeling, let herself believe that everything would be okay. But she couldn't ignore the reality that waited for her outside that room. The next morning, she woke early and made her way back to her family home. The gate still squeaked as she opened it, the sound a reminder of the many times she had come and gone through this place. But this time, there was no one to greet her. She pushed open the door, the hinges protesting from disuse. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. No laughter, no clinking dishes, no music, just the silence of a place abandoned. She wandered through the rooms, memories pressing in on her from every side. The worn couch where her father had fallen asleep reading the newspaper. The tiny kitchen where her mother had taught her to make pap and stew. The yard where her siblings had played soccer until the sun dipped below the horizon. Every corner of this house held a piece of her heart, and yet now it felt like a stranger's home. She walked into the kitchen and set her father's gift, the envelope of cash she had meant to hand him on Christmas Eve, on the table. Next to it, she placed a single sheet of paper. Her handwriting was steady, each letter sharp and unyielding. "I came, I saw, and now I know. He was alone. You chose a holiday over family. I'm not angry, just changed." She left it there, an indictment and a farewell all at once. As she turned to leave, she glanced at the small calendar still pinned to the wall. A single date circled in bright red marker, December 25th. Next to it, her mother had written, "Durban trip." Evelyn felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. A vacation had taken priority over a dying man. She didn't know if she would ever understand that kind of choice. Maybe she didn't want to. Outside, the sun had already begun its climb, harsh and bright against the worn paint of the house. She pulled the gate shut behind her and walked back to the main road. The taxi stand was quiet, the drivers idly chatting as they waited for passengers. One of them recognized her and waved. "Evelyn, back from the city?" he called. She forced a smile and nodded. "Just visiting," she replied, though it felt like a lie. The driver offered her a ride back to Johannesburg, and she accepted. As the car pulled away, she looked back one last time at the house that had both built her and broken her. She thought of her mother and siblings, laughing on a beach somewhere, unaware or perhaps unconcerned about the man they'd left behind. She thought of her father, lying in a hospital bed, and of the love he had given them all, so freely, so unconditionally. In that moment, Evelyn felt something inside her shift. She realized that love wasn't just about giving, it was about choosing who deserved it. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to choose herself. Back in Johannesburg, Evelyn found herself sitting in the quiet waiting room of the private hospital. The air smelled of antiseptic and muted worry. Her father rested in a freshly made bed, tubes and wires snaking from his thin arms. She had insisted on a private suite, the best that money could buy. She told herself it was what he deserved, a lifetime of sacrifice repaid in comfort at the end. But the guilt still clung to her like a second skin. Her phone vibrated on the table beside her, screen lighting up with missed calls and unread messages. Her mother had called 6 times. Her sister, 2. Her brother had sent 2 voicemails, one of them, she imagined, probably filled with excuses or justifications. Evelyn had yet to open a single one. The anger simmered just beneath her skin, but it was a cold, quiet anger now, the kind that didn't need to shout to be felt. She scrolled through the notifications, each one a reminder that the people she loved had let her father slip away like he was an afterthought. She looked at him now, his face sunken but peaceful. He had always been the quiet strength of the family, no grand speeches, no harsh words. He worked long hours in the fields, selling produce at the market when he could, teaching Evelyn the value of honesty and humility. He was the one who taught her how to ride a bike and how to save her first paychecks. And yet, in his moment of greatest need, he had been left alone by everyone but her. That thought burrowed deep into her chest. In the small hours of the morning, he woke, his eyes opening slowly as if waking from a heavy dream. His gaze met hers, and for a moment the lines on his face softened into the familiar smile that always made her feel safe. "Evie," he rasped, voice dry but laced with relief. "I didn't know if you'd come." Evelyn leaned forward and took his hand, pressing it gently. "I'm here now," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." He closed his eyes and sighed. "Your mother. She wanted the beach," he murmured. "She said it was just a short holiday." Evelyn bit her lip to stop the sharp words that threatened to pour out. He shouldn't have to defend them. He shouldn't have to carry their failures. She shook her head, her voice firm but gentle. "Don't worry about them now, Dad. You just focus on getting better." He squeezed her hand weakly, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. "I never wanted this for you," he said. "I didn't want you to carry it all." She felt her own tears slip free, rolling down her cheeks unchecked. "You carried all of us for so long, Dad," she said softly. "Let me carry you now." He tried to smile again, but the effort seemed to sap his strength. He drifted back into sleep, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts. Outside the hospital window, Johannesburg hummed with life, a city that never paused, not even for grief. Evelyn watched as taxis zipped by, their headlights streaking the night. She wondered what her mother was doing in Durban, maybe lounging on the sand, sipping cold drinks with the kids, and sending text messages that pretended nothing had changed. The thought made her stomach twist. Later that day, she found the courage to check the messages. Her mother's voice, so familiar and yet suddenly so distant, filled her ears. "Evie, please call me," the first message said, strained and tearful. "I didn't know he was so sick. We thought he'd be okay until we got back. You know your father, he never wanted to be a burden." Evelyn's jaw clenched. He'd never wanted to be a burden because he'd spent his life making sure he never was, because he had always put them first. Her brother's voice, normally brash and carefree, cracked in the second voicemail. "Sis, I didn't think it would be this bad. I thought you'd handle it like you always do." Evelyn's eyes stung with the injustice of it, like she always did. Of course. Because she was the fixer, the responsible one, the one who cleaned up every mess. A nurse appeared at the door, clipboard in hand, and Evelyn forced herself to stand straighter. "He's stable," the nurse said with a polite smile. "He's a fighter." Evelyn nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The nurse's smile softened with understanding. "He's lucky to have you," she added gently. Evelyn thanked her, though the words felt empty. Was he lucky, or had she simply picked up where everyone else had dropped him? The days blurred together in a rhythm of hospital meals and whispered conversations. Evelyn watched her father's strength return in small increments, a longer conversation here, a small smile there. But with every sign of improvement came another reminder that the people who should have been here weren't. Her mother called once, crying so hard Evelyn could barely understand her. She spoke of pressure, of confusion, of how her father had insisted they go and have fun. Evelyn said nothing in response. Her silence spoke louder than any argument could. Her siblings sent money small transfers, always labeled just to help. Evelyn scoffed at their belated gestures. Where had their help been when he lay alone in a public ward? Where had their voices been when he needed comfort instead of silence? One evening, as Evelyn sat by his bedside reading a book aloud, he reached for her hand. "Don't hate them," he whispered. His voice was so thin now, so fragile that it felt like a paper bird in her palm. She swallowed the lump in her throat and squeezed his fingers gently. "I don't hate them," she said honestly, "but I can't pretend anymore. I can't keep giving without them giving back." His eyes glistened with both pride and sorrow. "You've always been too strong for your own good," he murmured, "but I'm proud of you." Evelyn felt the tears again, hot, unstoppable, but silent. She didn't want him to see her fall apart. Not now. Not when he needed her to be the pillar she had always tried to be. When he drifted back to sleep, Evelyn leaned back in her chair, staring at the steady rise and fall of his chest. She thought of the years she had spent wiring money home, her salary, her promotions, her dreams, all sent away in the name of family. She thought of the phone calls that had always ended with a request. She thought of the siblings who laughed with her when they wanted something and disappeared when she needed them. In that quiet room, Evelyn felt something shift. Love didn't mean surrender. Love didn't mean carrying everyone forever while they learned to let go. Love meant choosing who to fight for, and she would fight for her father until his last breath. But the others? She would let the silence speak for now. Outside, Johannesburg's skyline glowed like a promise. Evelyn watched the lights. Wambawai, her heart heavy but resolute. This was no longer just about duty. It was about truth. And she was finally ready to face it. Johannesburg had always been a city that never slept. But to Evelyn, the nights now felt even longer, long corridors of silence stretching between hospital visits and restless dreams. Her father's condition had stabilized, but the doctors had warned her that his recovery would be slow. Pneumonia had weakened his body, and the emotional weight of neglect had left its own scars. Every morning, she woke. Her phone was a constant presence, buzzing with messages she could no longer ignore. Her mother's voice cracked through voicemail after voicemail. "Evie, please pick up. I'm so sorry. We never thought it would be this bad." Her brother's texts were short but heavy. "We messed up. We know that now. Please call." Even her sister, normally aloof, had sent a handwritten letter delivered by a mutual friend who'd come by the hospital to drop off fruit. Evelyn had read the letter late at night in the hospital corridor, lit only by a single harsh overhead light. "Evie," Diana had written, her looping handwriting unmistakable even after all these years. "I know we failed you. We failed Dad. We didn't know how to handle it all. We thought you'd take care of things like you always do, but now I see he was alone, and you carried it all. I'm so sorry." Evelyn had folded the letter neatly and placed it back in her bag, her hands trembling. She didn't know what to do with their guilt. She didn't know how to process her own rage, cold and sharp, like glass in her chest. She had spent her entire life patching every hole, filling every void, holding everyone else's world together. But this time, something had broken inside her that she wasn't sure could be fixed. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the decision was made for her. Her mother showed up at the hospital unannounced, wrapped in a cheap shawl that she kept pulling tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes were puffy and red, her lips trembling as she approached Evelyn in the corridor. "Evie," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "I just want to see him." Evelyn felt her body stiffen. She looked at her mother, the woman who had taught her how to braid hair, how to cook stew, how to scrub the floors until they shone, and she felt 100 memories crash against the one undeniable fact. She had left him. Evelyn's voice came out calm, almost gentle, but it was steel underneath. "He doesn't want to see you," she said evenly, "and right now his peace matters more than your guilt." Her mother's mouth fell open, tears slipping down her face. "I'm still his wife," she choked out, her voice a mixture of desperation and defiance. Evelyn nodded, her jaw tight. "And I'm still his daughter," she replied. "And I won't let you disturb his peace, not now that he's finally getting the care he deserves." Her mother reached for her hand, but Evelyn pulled back. "Please," her mother whispered, "I never meant to." Evelyn cut her off with a small shake of her head. "Go home," she said quietly. "Heal yourself. We have healing to do here, and there's no room for your guilt." For a long moment, her mother stood there, tears streaming, but Evelyn didn't waver. She watched as her mother turned away, shoulders shaking. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was a small victory, painful but necessary. Over the next days, her siblings tried every way they could think of to reach her. Diana sent flowers with notes begging for forgiveness. Her brother, Mark, tried sending small amounts of money labeled "just helping out." But Evelyn knew the difference between genuine remorse and guilt-ridden obligation. None of them had come to the hospital. Not one had sat by their father's bed, listening to his ragged breaths and feeding him soup when he was too weak to lift a spoon. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Evelyn sat beside her father's bed, reading aloud from his favorite book of African folk tales. His eyes fluttered open, and he smiled weakly. "You always knew how to bring stories to life," he whispered, his voice a ghost of its former strength. Evelyn closed the book and set it aside. "It's easy when the stories matter," she said softly. He looked at her then, his gaze sharp despite his frailty. "Your mother and the others," he began. Evelyn shook her head. "Don't," she said. "They made their choice. I made mine." Tears welled in his eyes. "I never wanted you to be alone in this," he murmured. Evelyn felt her own tears break free, warm on her cheeks. "I'm not alone, Dad," she said, her voice steady even as it cracked. "I have you, and that's enough for now." He smiled a small, tired smile that held all the love in the world. "You've always been stronger than you knew," he said. Evelyn leaned forward and kissed his forehead, letting the tears flow. "I learned from you," she whispered. Outside the hospital window, Johannesburg glowed in the dusk, a city of lights and lives that carried on no matter whose heart was breaking. Evelyn looked at the skyline and felt a quiet resolve settle in her chest. She couldn't fix what had been broken between her and her family, not yet. Maybe not ever. But she could protect her father. She could be the daughter he had always known her to be, loyal, unwavering, and unafraid of the truth. And for now, that was enough. The days stretched into weeks, and Evelyn settled into a quiet routine at the private hospital. Her father's strength returned slowly, like the first warm rays after a long winter. Some days he could sit up and smile at her jokes, and on others he barely opened his eyes. But Evelyn was there every morning, every night, feeding him soup, helping him bathe, holding his hand through the darkest hours. She started to build a rhythm that felt both new and strangely comforting. Early mornings were spent with the doctors, discussing his progress, adjusting medications. Afternoons she worked remotely, tapping away on her laptop in the small corner of the hospital room. Evenings were for her father, reading his favorite folk tales, playing his favorite old records on her phone, letting the familiar melodies drift between them like an unspoken promise. Her siblings' calls came often now, always urgent, always tinged with guilt. Diana's messages were the longest paragraphs of apologies, confessions, and promises to do better. Mark tried to hide his guilt with humor, sending memes or photos of his cooking disasters as if laughter could stitch up the broken places. Even her mother, always so proud and certain, had started sending voice notes that sounded more like prayers than conversations. Evelyn read them all, listened to them all, but she didn't reply. Not yet. She needed time. Time to remember who she was before she became their fixer, their rescuer, their unending supply of money and comfort. She needed to know that her worth didn't begin and end with what she could give. One quiet Saturday morning, while her father slept, Evelyn sat by the hospital window and watched the sun climb over Johannesburg. The city felt different now, no longer a place she had to fight to belong, but a place she had claimed for herself. She thought about all the years she had wired her salary back home, about all the times she'd said yes without question. She realized that she had taught them how to treat her, how to expect everything and give back nothing. But now, sitting here with her father safe at last, she felt something stronger than anger. Clarity. She would not hate them. She would not become bitter. But she would not be used either. That afternoon, the doctor came in with a hopeful smile. Her father's condition had stabilized enough for him to be discharged. Evelyn felt tears spring to her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. She arranged everything, the transport, the private nurse, the medications. She even prepared her small apartment to welcome him home, converting the guest room into a bright, airy space with his favorite quilt on the bed and the old radio he loved. When the ambulance arrived at her building, Evelyn stood by the curb, helping the paramedics ease her father out. His eyes widened as he took in the place, small but clean, full of light and music. "It's beautiful, Evie," he whispered, his voice trembling. She smiled and kissed his forehead. "It's your home now," she said softly. "You're safe here." The days that followed were slow but full. Evelyn balanced conference calls with cooking his meals, arranging his medications, and sitting by his side through the long afternoons. Sometimes he would doze off while she worked, his hand resting lightly on hers. Sometimes they would talk about his childhood, about her dreams, and sometimes they would sit in silence, the kind that was full rather than empty. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, he reached for her hand and squeezed it. "Promise me you won't carry it all anymore," he said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Evelyn felt her own tears slip free, but she smiled. "I promise, Dad," she whispered. "I'm learning to carry myself, too." He nodded, and that small gesture felt like a blessing. In the weeks that followed, her siblings kept reaching out. Diana sent more letters, each one softer, more honest, asking for forgiveness, but also understanding that forgiveness wasn't a right, but a gift. Mark's messages turned serious, telling her he'd started visiting their father's grave every week back home, trying to make sense of his own failures. Her mother's voice notes changed, too less defensive, more humble, asking, "How can I make this right?" Evelyn still didn't answer, not yet. One day, as she sat on her small balcony with a cup of tea, her father's old radio playing soft music behind her, she realized the anger had started to loosen its grip. Grief still lived inside her, but it no longer owned her. She had built something new from the ashes, something strong enough to hold both the love and the pain. It was a chilly morning in late autumn when she finally sent her first reply. She messaged Diana, "I'll be at Dad's grave next Saturday at 10. If you want to come, I won't stop you." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. That Saturday she dressed simply, a white blouse, jeans, her father's favorite scarf. She brought fresh lilies, his favorite. As she stood by his grave, the tree overhead shedding its leaves like a soft farewell, she felt a quiet strength settle in her chest. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see them, Diana, Mark, and their mother standing at a distance. No one spoke at first. Finally, Evelyn nodded. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice calm. Her mother stepped forward, her eyes red but steady. "I don't know how to fix what we broke," she whispered. Evelyn took a slow breath and met her gaze. "You can't," she said, "not all of it. But maybe we can build something new if you're willing to do the work." Diana stepped closer, tears on her cheeks. "We are, Evie," she said. "We are." There were no hugs, no dramatic reconciliations, just honesty, raw and fragile. As they stood together, Evelyn felt the weight of her past start to lift. She wasn't the same girl who had left Limpopo all those years ago. She wasn't just the fixer or the giver. She was Evelyn daughter, sister, woman, strong enough to set boundaries, brave enough to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. And in that moment, under that tree, she chose herself.